Hello, and welcome to our conversation today. For those of you watching us on Instagram as well, it's a bit challenging for me to focus on both audiences at the same time. Today, we are going to talk about something I have been preparing to discuss with you for some time now. For those who remember, we had a conversation at the beginning of the pandemic. It was about how to deal with the crisis, how to live through the crisis, something along those lines. At that time, I shared some advice on the subject, on how to prepare for what was approaching. Well, we are not exactly at the end of the crisis. No one knows how much longer it will last, but considering that it began around mid-March and we are now practically in November, we have about 7, going on 8 months of experience. In other words, we now have a sample size that allows us to reflect and consequently to make a diagnosis. What I want to discuss with you today, taking into account this period of experience we have already accumulated, I do not know when we will emerge from this, whether it will take long or happen quickly, but with this sample we now possess, is to make an assessment of how we are doing, if we are indeed making progress, how we are behaving, and what conclusions about humanity we can already draw at this stage of the journey. So, this is the analysis I propose. And there is another important point. I will not speak about what happens in Brazil. This immense, this mega inferiority complex that, in general, we all share. Fortunately, I have been trying to free myself from this, from thinking that bad things only happen here, when in fact, all forms of human alienation are highly globalized. We have alienations that are more globalized than Chinese products in the market. You can be sure of that. Our habits, our escapes, our tendencies are very common throughout the world. Therefore, I am not speaking only about Brazil, but rather making a diagnosis that considers humanity as a whole at this stage of the game. What can we observe from everything that has been experienced? 7 months, almost 8, would already be enough for a being to come into the light. In other words, we are already able to shed light on some aspects and reach certain conclusions. Well, let us begin to consider some of these points in this reflective conversation of ours, which I hope you will follow and reflect upon with me without barriers, simply trying to evaluate what we have already experienced and what we are still experiencing. First of all, when all of this began, we expected the pandemic to be much milder and shorter than it actually was and still is. Even in our worst expectations, we thought that in 2 or 3 months, at most by April, May, June, or July, the second semester, everything would already be fine. No one expected this to become so severe. And probably, as we will discuss next, we overestimated our ability to solve problems, to find quick solutions, or any kind of problem. We thought we were almost omnipotent, and we began to realize that this was not quite the case. We expected that, very quickly, a solution would emerge from somewhere, a saving solution. All we had to do was wait. This is yet another tremendous element of complacency. Well, now I just need to stay quiet here, because the saviors will come and solve this problem quickly. And soon they will open the doors so that I can return to my ordinary life. Nothing will disrupt my routine. I will go back to being who I was. At no point did we think we would be called to participate actively in this, in terms of changing our attitude, in terms of taking initiative. It's always like this. I withdraw and let those who have to solve go solve. And I simply wait comfortably for the solution to come knocking at my door. That was the expectation we had. We imagined we had more power than we actually did have. We imagined there was no being in the micro or macroscopic world that could stand against us for so long, that could threaten us so strongly. We thought we had mastered the knowledge of all possible enemies. We did not know our own smallness, nor the insignificance of our knowledge. We were unaware of how much mystery nature still held for us. Therefore, this too came as a surprise. What else can we honestly recognize? I'm not talking about others. I include myself in this. Let us sit down and reflect, making a sincere analysis of what we all experienced during this period, without controversy, without the idea of refusing to question. Today, it is something incredible. You can't even finish a sentence of 10 words without being interrupted halfway by someone eager to contest, before even listening. Let us set aside this spirit of contradiction and listen to this calmly. What else? The attitudes we witnessed during this period. Some, more hopeful, imagined that extreme pain would unite us around those who were wounded. Isn't that so? When many people began to suffer, humanity would unite around these problems. That did not happen. We thought we would come together as if we were a family. We were mistaken. This is a sign that we are not yet a family. Humanity still has a long way to go to reach that point, a very long way indeed. The situation became critical, and yet we did not unite in any way. We are far from being a family. What else? We can see that we only truly feel pain when it knocks at our own door. In other words, is it me or is it a loved one? That is when this pain truly comes, and we begin to seek help and feel this intense suffering. When pain knocks at someone else's door, their pain serves for us to take precautions or to be afraid. It generates caution or fear. In other words, I no longer go near anyone from that house. Very little compassion. As long as pain knocks at someone else's house, the problem belongs to others. And when we hear about it, we think, how will I protect myself from this? Very little compassion, far less than what we would hope for in the face of another's pain. It truly only becomes a vivid pain when it knocks at our own door. In other words, selfishness had affected us more deeply than we had consciously realized until then. We believed, and this was very common, I grew tired of reading this in texts, and sometimes even debated with people who defended this theory. We truly believed that we were no longer capable of exploiting the profound pain of others for our own benefit, as had happened in the past. So that barbarity of Genghis Khan, of Attila, king of the Huns, who tortured the children of his enemies, who played with the lives of others. No, not anymore. We have already overcome that. These are different times. We are much better human beings, much more evolved. We also had to be harshly confronted with this reality, and to realize that we are nowhere near the level of evolution we thought we had achieved as human beings. And soon we will delve further into this topic. And this made that argument indefensible. We have advanced in technology and humanism. Ignore the crisis. That argument is dismantled. What else? What else? We used to think that technological advancement was the same as human evolution, reiterating what we have just discussed. We are the kind of humanity capable of interfering with the trajectory of a comet on a collision course with our planet. We are able to roughly perceive the dimensions of a satellite orbiting a star light years away. We believe that we, as human beings, possess this maturity, this fulfillment, this entire potential. We realize that these are two very different things, that technology and our knowledge of the world around us have not advanced at the same pace as our understanding of ourselves as human beings. Our mastery over certain external situations is not progressing in parallel with our mastery over ourselves. This, once again, is a fallacy, and we have been able to experience this very intensely. What else did we used to believe, which today becomes very difficult to defend, given all that we have already experienced? We used to think that a cultured person was the same as an educated person. In other words, someone with many years of formal education and many courses was necessarily someone who educated themselves. That is, someone who has drawn out and brought forth their best qualities. And we have seen many so-called cultured men, academics of all kinds, acting with absolute selfishness in their stances in the face of this situation. Many of them even opportunists. Therefore, we realize that our current standard of education, in practice, does not form individuals, it merely informs them. We have encountered this repeatedly along the way. Therefore, today it is no longer possible, as it was 7 months ago, to discuss this topic in the same way. It has already become somewhat commonplace. We see things as they are. It is indisputable. What else? We used to believe that extreme cruelty was no longer so common among us, except in rare cases of criminal psychopaths who were in institutions, being penalized or something of that sort. We thought that cruelty was not common among us. We had to. This belief was harshly shattered. And it could be even more so if we begin to unravel the thread of all the things that have happened. Because, as well informed as we are, we often have not reached the very bottom of the well of cruelty that was committed, and it is still in the midst of all that has happened. We believe that the human conscience, in our historical moment, for example, could no longer bear the thought of buying a luxury car with money meant for a ventilator, while someone suffocated to death in a hospital because of that act, and yet everything seemed acceptable. We thought that this no longer belonged to our historical era, at least not among ordinary people. Everyone who could profit from this, everyone did. It's always an exaggeration, isn't it? But many of those who could profit from this truly did so. And they showed no sign of remorse or pangs of conscience about it. On the contrary, they tried to escape the consequences in the best way possible. In other words, people can bear the thought of someone dying suffocated so that they can have a newer car. In our times, this is not some barbarity of the past. They endure it, and they endure it well. And if they are not caught, they are very pleased with themselves. In other words, we still have this among us, in a way that is quite common, much more widespread than we had previously imagined. What else? We thought that no one would dare to triple the price of gas so that families, even those receiving food baskets, would have no way to cook their meals. I bring this up so you can see that this happened across all social strata to avoid yet another polarization. We helped distribute food baskets at New Acropolis. When we arrived, people said, "It's no use, miss, having food. There's no money for gas. The price has tripled, and it really has." Do you know why? In every social class, there were opportunists trying to take advantage of the situation. Even if families were left with food they couldn't prepare, for some, it was seen as a good opportunity to make money. In other words, this kind of behavior was present in all social strata, and there were not just a few. Do not try to hide from reality. There were, and still are, more than we might imagine. If we can say, of course, that it was not everyone, we also cannot deny that it was not just a few. We thought that no one would be capable of dismissing an employee in the midst of a crisis, unless there was an extreme necessity. In other words, if I myself have nothing left, if I am going bankrupt, well, there is not much that can be done. But without any pressing need, many people sent their employees home without even paying them their rights, leaving them unemployed at home in isolation, with their children going hungry. Many people did this. Many took advantage of the situation to get rid of their employees, leaving them to fend for themselves to survive, while thinking, I have to protect myself. We never thought we would be capable of doing such things, and yet we saw this happening everywhere. At times, we even had to help employees of others. So harsh and scandalous was the situation, and it became all too common. We never imagined it, and yet it happened far too often. It was not only the predatory business owner, as is often thought in social mindsets, but even that respectable neighbor living near your home. It happened everywhere, in all directions. We thought that no one would dare, in the midst of crisis, to sabotage each other. Those who were seeking solutions did not believe they would end up in a rivalry, sabotaging one another, hoping the other would not find a solution, even knowing that if the other succeeded, many lives would be spared, sabotaging the other so that they would not find solutions and save people, because it had to be me who found the answer, not them. We did not think this would happen, and yet it happened. And to reiterate what I have been saying up to now, it was by no means insignificant, nor is it now. Let us be clear. We cannot pretend we did not see these things. They were glaringly obvious, so blatant, in fact, that we think, nothing can shock me anymore. But even so, it was still possible to be deeply shocked. We have shown that our layer of civilization is but a thin film, a covering far more meager than I ever imagined it could be. It does not cover our bodies at all, nor does it conceal any of our flaws. What else can we observe in all of this? We believe that no one would try to crucify another simply for thinking differently, when both act out of goodwill. If I want to help someone, and you do too, and you choose a different path, and both of us wish to do something beneficial for humanity, I sincerely hope your path is the right one. Whoever arrives first lends a hand, because that person needs help, and that is what truly matters. We did not think that, in such moments, people would criticize each other. On the other hand, not seeking the same path as another, not walking the same road in search of solutions, even if a solution, by any path, could save lives. There continue to be disputes, envy, and rivalries among those who should be committed to finding solutions and hoping that others find them as well. Did it happen? It happened. Much more than we could have anticipated. And how many lives have been lost amid these disputes, this scrambling for position around the world? Because the one who must arrive first is me, not you. We thought we would unite. What a beautiful hope that was. A great crisis comes, and now we will unite. We thought that hatred would subside, that we would stop hating each other and arguing over trivialities, that in the midst of death, in the midst of pain, we would stop with such foolishness. We thought there would be more love and compassion, but it seems not. It seems the response was not absent, but it was far less significant than we had imagined. In other words, what can we conclude from all of this in our brief and concise conversation today? Of course, there were many highly commendable individual cases, and I will talk about them in just a moment. But on average, we as humanity have failed. We did poorly on the test. We did not pass this test. I do not know if there will be a second chance, but the fact is, We did not do well. And do not think that I am a pessimist for saying this. I am someone who roots for humanity and works on its behalf. But look, clarity is necessary. The dream may be wild, but the dreamer must remain lucid. I dream of a better humanity, but I cannot ignore what surrounds us. As a majority, we have not done well so far in this task to which humanity has been subjected. There were individual merits, yes, of course, and fortunately there were. And all of this, the ones who did poorly and the ones who did well, can teach us many things. Shall we reflect on this together? What are the things we could learn from all of this? Today, we realize that there are many things more important to us, to society, than the human being. The human being is still secondary. They can be used, they can be ignored. In the midst of a public health crisis, where the issue at hand was death, there were things considered far more important at stake. People were concerned with other matters. And many lives were lost because human beings did not see human life as the fundamental purpose. As always, the human being became a means. The ends are personal objectives. As Kant said, it is extremely immoral to treat the human being as a means, to treat the rational being as a means. In this crisis, we realize that this is not just a stylistic device of the great Enlightenment philosopher. We actually operate this way, even in the midst of a pandemic, a frightening public health crisis of global proportions. The human being did not become the end. The means continue to be an entire game of interests at every level, from top to bottom, so we shouldn't try to label good guys and bad guys, because honestly, there is no mentality more childish than this notion of good guys and bad guys. We can see that even within the group we consider to be the good guys, there were plenty of people taking advantage. In the group of so-called bad guys, there were also some people who set an example, who were good, who gave their best. We are not in a soap opera where the good guy is born good and remains good until the end of time. And the bad guy, from the very first episode, you can already tell he's going to get what's coming to him. Life is not a soap opera. We are a mixture of both, as Plato would say, and within each of us, all of us, there is a measure of humanity and a measure of cruelty. And we thought that this situation would be an excellent tool to help us reduce this degree of cruelty. And it was not, by any means, to the extent that we had hoped. We must acknowledge this, for it is only from recognition that we can attempt to change. What else have we observed? That which does not concern my own skin, or the extension of my own skin to close physical relatives, that is, my children, my parents, my siblings, whatever belongs to me, whatever is a transfer from myself to that small group around me. That which does not concern my particular or extended self does not awaken many feelings in me. I am numb to true feelings. It is very difficult to feel a vivid pain for the death of thousands of people if those people are, I don't know, somewhere far away, in Italy, or I don't even know where. It is very difficult to have a vivid feeling. We have statistics, and statistics are cold. And the only thing we think in the face of this is, when will it reach here? Or more specifically, my city, or my neighborhood close to me. Statistics are generally not accompanied by a single tear. Our feelings are still very much infantilized. We have emotions, emotions scattered to the four winds, absolutely disordered and beyond our control. But our feelings are still in their infancy. The possibility of feeling for others. We have seen that this is still far from enough for us to be considered true human beings. Well, we also notice that there are many people around the world speaking beautiful words. but in practice. When these people take action, nothing matters more than their own interests. Nothing comes first above their own interests. How I will use this situation to prevail, to stand out, to gain some advantage. How many have been able to reverse this equation and to act solely and exclusively with the purpose of compassion to minimize the pain of others? We realize that this is complicated, and many of those who deliver beautiful speeches, when that civilizational veneer trembled, cracked, and fell away, we saw that they were just another person seeking personal advantage in any circumstance. And consideration for humanity, we saw how rare it is. Our humanity is an abstraction. We do not feel its skin. We do not feel its pain. We do not feel the sentiment of humanity. It is an abstraction to us. It is merely a statistic. How do we perceive this? That it is important for us to face problems, recognizing that we have the power to change them. And this selfishness, this indifference, we have often seen manifest itself in sectors that were created and, by definition, exist to serve and act in the interests of the collective everywhere in the world. For example, why was politics created? Was it not to care for the polis, for the city, for humanity? How do we notice, in sectors that were born to care for the whole, that in reality, the whole often does not matter much? It becomes a very secondary element. A multitude of personal interests come into play there. In short, so many things that we may have suspected, but that have now come to light in such a concrete way. Look, do not turn away. I don't want to see it. It is very hard to witness, but it is by seeing that we can gain a sense of where we stand and begin to change, to leave behind so much immaturity, so much childishness. If humanity were on the verge of extinction, fortunately, we are beginning to want to overcome this problem, though still with ups and downs. If humanity were truly facing extinction, would this behavior change? Or would the third to last person still be thinking only of themselves? Be careful. The panorama that has been revealed is a deeply unhealthy one, and we must not turn away from it, because only by seeing can we make a diagnosis that allows us to turn the tables. Continuing with some of these attitudes, our initiative to seek solutions, in general, on average, is close to zero. We believe there are people who are paid to look for solutions, and we are paid only to enjoy the solutions, to remain quiet, waiting for someone to do something and solve everything for us. And then we roll out the red carpet and return to our lives. There are people who are paid to think about the problems of humanity. I am only paid to enjoy the benefits. Our lack of initiative, our inability to realize that we can do something, no matter how small, because when you multiply something small by more than 7 billion, it becomes enormous, it becomes gigantic. We have stopped believing in this and have become very, very, very passive, waiting for salvation, a great leader, a savior, a miracle. Miracles happen when human beings act as true human beings. This is the greatest miracle that can occur. But no, we believe in rabbits pulled out of hats and solutions that fall from the sky, when in fact it is we ourselves who must work to help build the cradle of these solutions. We always think that we can do absolutely nothing. Throughout all this time, I have raised a call almost every day on the internet. See what you are able to do. Support a friend, offer comfort, share a message of hope online. Do not take part in anything that fuels hatred and division. This is a time for unity. Call a supermarket, arrange for a food basket to be delivered to an organization distributing aid. Do your best, do your best, do your best. How have we become so settled in the idea that we are powerless? We don't even try to see if there's something we can do, because what if I discover that I can? That would disrupt my comfort, and it would force me into commitment. So sometimes we don't even try. We spend much more time, in general, much more time and mental energy looking for someone to blame than seeking solutions. That is the diagnosis. Well, how sad. She brought me here today just to make me sad. No, there are good things too, but these elements themselves are not negative. Yes, what is negative is the behavior we have exhibited, but recognizing them is not morbidity. Acknowledging them is necessary so that, from the diagnosis, we can begin to apply the remedy. Without a diagnosis, there is no appropriate remedy. Therefore, it is important that we face all of this with clarity and lucidity. No one here is trying to sabotage anyone. We want to know where we stand so that we can move forward, take the next step. This is natural, this is necessary, this is positive. Continuing. And then, yes, we will move to the other side. There is always another side. Fortunately, the world is dual, and there are things on the other side. I won't be able to list them all, just as I couldn't for the previous side either, but some things are indisputable. For example, first and foremost, the healthcare professional. Of course, not all of them, but a great many, let's be honest, were heroes. What healthcare professionals did during this period was impeccable. It was admirable, many of them. They gave their best, to a limit that bordered on madness, on extreme self-sacrifice. Many had high-risk family members and could not return home, staying in hotels, sometimes even staying in the hospital itself to continue working. Several, already infected, hoped their illness would pass as quickly as possible so they could return to work. I met people like that. Many, suspecting they were contaminated, postponed the moment of getting tested so they could continue working with those who were already infected. A little more, a little more, a little more, just to get a little more. I also came across cases like this. This is not a theory. It truly happened. Many ended up practically living at their workplaces, in their hospitals, in their clinics, in their care. Many accompany patients in moments of agony. These patients, isolated, without contact with their relatives, their loved ones. Many were the only company these patients had, holding their hands tightly, offering hope. And even further, many were the last face that countless people saw before leaving this world. A face of understanding, of compassion, of solidarity. Many were alone with those who departed, and they were truly present with them. Many wept alongside the families. Many reached the limits of extreme exhaustion. Many gave everything of themselves. And this is an example we must not forget. Within this group, of course, there must have been heroes and many others, but within this group, there was a number, a truly significant number of them. In tribute to these healthcare professionals, I have brought here a short excerpt of something very familiar to them. A passage, a fragment from the Hippocratic Oath, in its opening lines, just listen. I solemnly pledge to dedicate my life to the service of humanity. I will practice my art with conscience and dignity. The health of my patient will be my first concern. You who have sworn this oath, healthcare professionals, have been greatly honored. During this crisis, many of you have stood out. It is never everyone, but many of you have. Therefore, that Dr. Hippocrates and other mythical and inspiring doctors from history, such as Asclepius and Serapis, wherever they may be, must be very proud of you. You truly gave your all and demonstrated exemplary collaboration in this most challenging time. My congratulations. Obviously, it was not only this profession, but there are many others as well, such as, for example, police officers. A special congratulations to those people who did not allow opportunists to make the crisis worse than it already was, and who did not have the freedom to work from home. They had to be out on the streets, with or without the virus, in crisis or not. Workers in general, people who transported food, all those who had to remain active so that our social structure would not collapse. My congratulations to you for your sense of responsibility and for the care each of you showed during this time. This is the moment for us to recognize what is truly valuable within us and to give the proper recognition and the proper respect. Congratulations, the due celebration to those who have made such great efforts. What else? There were many cases not necessarily related to a profession, but of people whom you might have thought were so limited that there was nothing they could do. I heard, for example, about an elderly lady, 80 years old, completely isolated because she was in a very high-risk group, but who never let go of her phone. And she would send messages of hope to everyone in her contacts and to others she discovered or was referred to. Not a single day went by without her sending prayers, uplifting words, and affection to all those who were suffering, whether they were in high-risk groups or not. This lady went to the very limits of her abilities to be a positive force, and she truly was. She must have eased the pain of many, and surely brought hope to many others. She, who many believed could do nothing. There is always something that can be done. There were many cases like this. What else? People who mobilized to collect and deliver food baskets to every corner, who put on whatever protective equipment they could, prayed deeply, entered homes, left food baskets there, listened to people's needs, and did whatever they could to help. People did everything they could to donate food baskets, sometimes even giving up their own, and organized campaigns among family and friends so that this support could continue, so that the suffering of many could be lessened. Many people did their very best. We cannot overlook this. There was a great deal of individual merit. Those who made it a priority to ensure the safety of their employees, who made every possible sacrifice to maintain their salaries, to check if they were well, and to see if they needed anything. Indeed, there was a great deal of individual merit. People who reached out to support those in vulnerable situations. You know that there were groups in Brazil and around the world who cared not only for their own grandmothers or grandfathers, but for all elderly people who were isolated at home, perhaps without any family, becoming their adoptive relatives and meeting their needs. There were people who dedicated themselves to this work, many people across the globe, acting on their own initiative, forming groups, forming brigades. Many other professionals, whom I may have forgotten to mention, ensured that food remained available in supermarkets, guaranteeing that food could continue to reach our tables, and many others as well. There was a great deal of individual merit. We must recognize this, and we must value it. We are not standing on scorched earth. We have many seeds, and these seeds can be highly fruitful because in times of such darkness, even a small light can be seen from afar. This reminds me of a sermon by Buddha, which I have often mentioned to you, the sermon at Benares. Whoever holds a small lamp When there is great darkness, that light can be seen from a great distance. As Helena Blavatsky would say, the one who does their best does all that can be expected of them. Congratulations to all of these individuals, and to a few others who also succeeded. Within their groups, be they circles of friends or family groups, they managed to grasp the gravity of this situation and were able to put an end to any unfounded controversy, offenses, mutual hatred, divisions, tribalism, or any trivial quarrel. Any reason for separation and hatred was set aside so that they could do something, even if it was just a meaningful prayer for humanity. Those who were able to understand that, in the midst of this situation, there was no room for petty quarrels, for tribal behaviors, for hatred, for division, for walls. It was a time for building bridges. Those who understood the urgency of compassion, the urgency of putting themselves in service to humanity. And they did so, even if it was through a simple prayer. And they did a great deal because they did it wholeheartedly. I brought for these individuals and for everyone a beautiful example of a suggested prayer, which is not exactly a prayer, but rather advice given by the philosopher Helena Blavatsky. In one of her texts, she says the following: "Rise early, as soon as you awaken, without lying indolently in bed, half asleep and half awake. Then pray with fervor, asking that all of humanity may be spiritually regenerated, that those who are striving along the path of truth may be encouraged by your prayers, that they may work with greater zeal and achieve success, and that you may be strengthened and not yield to the seductions of the senses." I find this text beautiful. Pray ardently, so that humanity may be spiritually regenerated. Some prayed. Some understood the necessity of this prayer, not for me, nor for any particular person, but for humanity. Some did it. And do not doubt, this goodwill, genuine and pure, surely echoed throughout the four corners of humanity. Because goodness is never innocuous, goodness is never sterile. This is a definition. So what can we conclude from this? This little conversation of ours today. We truly are not as good as we once thought, but now we are aware of this. As I have said in other talks, it is better to have scorched earth than castles in the air, castles of fantasy. On scorched earth, you have solid ground, where you can begin to build something consistent, something real. And now we know what we truly are. From this, it is possible to build something. Now, it is very difficult to patch up fantasies. We know what we are. We have a good diagnosis of the terrible pathology from which the human condition suffers. We know this can destroy it. Before, when people said selfishness is becoming dangerous, many told me that's an exaggeration, that's pessimism. That's not true at all. People are very altruistic nowadays. Today we have a very clear diagnosis of the extent of our illness. We are aware of the pathology that humanity suffers from, precisely the absence of humanity, and how dangerous this is. And now we can work to reestablish an identity, that is, to know where we want to go with all of this. We want living, united human beings working towards something constructive, to realize values through themselves, to add value to the world, to others, and to themselves. This is what we want. This is our goal. Everything else is trivial, and this became clear during this crisis. In the contrast between having everything and losing everything, we can perceive the value of many things. Now we know what a purpose is. a sense of life worthy of human beings, to preserve humanity with its dignity, with the values that are inherent to it. Once we know the goal, now we must know, and we can know exactly where we are. In other words, if I see exactly what is at the top of the ladder, and I am on the first step, but I think I am on the 10th, I will not reach the 11th. Perhaps I may even fall and lose the first step I had already conquered. Today, we can combat what Carl Jung called ego inflation, an inflated ego, believing we already possess so much, when in reality, we have very little identity. As I have said so many times before, it is based on two things: knowing where you want to go and knowing where you are. Now, if I get lost and want to reach your house and I call you, the first thing you will ask me is where I am, so you can help me find my way out from there and come here. If I do not know where I am, you cannot do anything for me. Identity is grounded in a purpose, a human sense of meaning in life, and knowing how far I am from that right now. And this crisis has given us a very good opportunity for self-diagnosis. What else? We can clearly see what our priorities are and what they should be from now on. We can realize how superficial and trivial our concerns and goals had been until now. We can see that the risk to humanity's survival is real, and that human beings have become as virulent as any virus, because the situation is critical and we are not working for life. And this is very serious. This is very serious because in the midst of such a dramatic situation, many do not work for life. Therefore, we are able to clearly see that our goals were childish. Now, we must set goals worthy of human beings, worthy of humanity, goals that work toward unity, so that our body may be organic, united, so that we may have health as humanity. Now we can, in fact, you may find it strange, but it is a fact, even allow ourselves to cry a little. As Helena Blavatsky used to say, from time to time, pain is good, it is sacred pain. This pain makes us realize not what we have lost, but what we could already have achieved and have not yet reached. How many steps ahead we could already be in our human condition, so that, in the face of any adversity, our cry would be unanimous: solidarity, empathy, compassion. And yet, the unanimous cry was not heard. Instead, it was every person for themselves. In some cases, it was even a matter of taking advantage if you could. So let us bring a bit of this pain within ourselves and feel it, so that this moment does not pass without consequence. And may we realize that we could be further along in our journey toward a fully realized human condition. We can now seriously commit ourselves to fighting the cancer that afflicts the body of humanity. The cancer afflicting the body of humanity as a whole is selfishness, which prevents us from thinking collectively. Not even in the most critical situations do we manage to do so, and we must resolutely strive to think as humanity more and more each day. That is, in every action, in every decision we make, we should aim to benefit as many people as possible, and not just myself and the handful of people I am interested in protecting. We can see how ultimately selfishness is suicidal, because a cancerous cell, in the end, kills the body and dies along with it. We can recognize how clearly selfishness can be diagnosed. It is the cancer of humanity, and it can destroy us all. This crisis has revealed just how alive it is, how alive and active it remains. We can see that we must be proactive. We must go to the limits of our possibilities, and we must always do our best. Always. Never believe that what we can do is insignificant. In fact, by reaching the limits of my possibilities, By persistently knocking on these doors, I can expand those limits. If today I will go to my maximum, tomorrow, probably I will go one step further. And the day after tomorrow, two steps. By constantly pushing the boundaries of our possibilities, we extend those limits and realize how harmful passivity can be. How failing to take responsibility for humanity as a whole can be damaging and, at times, even cruel. What else? We realize that we must learn to ignore the superficial voice of the human being and listen to their deeper voice. The superficial voices in this clamor around the world were a conflict, of dispute, of contradictory opinions, each one trying to pull things to their own side. But the deep voices of the human soul are in unison, they are one and the same. Help me to set myself free. Help me to come to the surface and take the reins of the life of this poor soul, who is acting so irrationally. If you do this within yourself first, you can help others to awaken as well. In other words, a contradictory and aggressive clamor, but deep down, only one voice. Help me to come to the surface. Do this within yourself first to show how it is done, because if I come to the surface, I make this foolish child within me begin to take responsibility for their own life, for the life of others, and for the whole. In other words, we have been called to go beyond appearances, beyond what people say, beyond what they think they want. And we can sharpen our ears and reach that point of understanding what people truly need. We can listen, and we must never forget this. More. We realize that, from this, those awakened individuals who have heard this voice must protect humanity from itself. We must cultivate the light. People are very misguided, and this is not the time to simply listen to them. It is the time to educate them, to awaken them, to be a beacon of light. And finally, as a message of hope, we realize that we must be Quixotes in the noble sense that our dear Cervantes spoke of. In the prologue of his book, he said, "After darkness, I await the light." And in my humble perception, I believe he was saying that someday people will understand the message I convey in this book. We must be Quixotes. Even if you face adverse circumstances, even if you encounter misunderstandings or even aggression around you, it is essential to maintain the dignity of committing yourself to goodness, to live it, so that through your example, this choice becomes part of the range of possibilities for all human beings, so that they may have the possibility to choose, among the many things the world offers, the option of being truly human through your example. I have brought for you, then, to complete our conversation, a short excerpt related to Don Quixote from that musical today, from La Mancha, which says the following, and it has much to do with our commitment, which is the result of the checkup we have done so far. And this short excerpt from the song's lyrics says the following, to dream the impossible dream, to suffer the relentless anguish, to tread where the brave do not dare, to right the wrong and the pain, to face the invincible enemy, to try, when strength is fading, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest. May we, in the face of this reality, with clarity, without discouragement, without pessimism or optimism, but with prudence, lucidity, and realism, we can also make this our goal. And let us not feel offended when they say of us, they are Quixotes. Yes, we are. That is the best thing one can be in historic moments such as this. Well, that was all I had to bring to you. As always, The people behind the scenes have asked me to remind you to like the talk, subscribe, and activate the notification bell. In other words, to participate more actively on the page and help us reach more people. Thank you all very much. And I hope that we continue moving forward with great perseverance, clarity, and hope until we reach the light at the end of the tunnel. A warm embrace to you all.